welcome to the Cinnabar. Now, I've had a lot of questions lately from people wanting to know when I'm going to post this year's hunting video. Well, I'm sorry to say I had to have a minor surgery and I'm all healed up now, but the best time they could schedule it for was right before hunting season. So I was recovering during hunting season and missed the whole doggone thing. And to add insult to injury, we came home from Cody the other day, and right here in the yard was a beautiful big mule deer buck and a group of does eating apples. So I did manage to get some pretty good footage of that buck, and I figured, why don't I just put together something and show maybe some of the past bucks and some antlers and maybe some pictures and video of wildlife from here on the ranch. And it may be a poor substitute for a hunting video, but I think you might enjoy it anyway. That's an awful nice buck. He's gonna come back and see us. There's Junior. Love is in the air. Now, just for fun, we've got some of the better, more interesting racks out on display down here in the shop. So let's take a little closer look at some of them that have come off the ranch in the past. So we'll start off with a very symmetrical, typical 4x4. This one's about 26 inches wide. Now remember, out here in the West, we don't count up every point. We don't count up eye guards. So we typically would say, in this instance, he's a 4x4. Or if there's a fifth point, we call him a 4x5. So it's a little confusing to some folks who are in those whitetail areas where they count up every point. Now here's an interesting one. This was an old guy, almost assuredly on the decline. Look at how heavy the rack is. Doesn't have near as many points probably as he did when he was younger. And just little kind of crab forks up there on the top to make him what we call a 3-point. Now he's probably been outside for a while, as chalky looking as those horns are. At some point that set of antlers was left outside, and it was probably killed in the early days of the ranch, I would suspect. Now we've got another really nice symmetrical 4x4. This one's about 28 inches wide. My wife's grandfather killed him, and if the tag on the back of that mount is correct, in 1940. And now we go from pretty typical and symmetrical to pretty wild. There's just all sorts of extra points there. You can even see a drop tine on the one side. The one eye guard's more kind of a dish. And the non-typicals in the mule deer community are really unusual. There's just not as big a percentage of them as there is in, say, the whitetail community. So this gene pool here on the ranch, we tend to get a little more strange configurations and more non-typicals than you would normally see in the average mule deer population. Let's move on down the line a little bit. Now, Now this guy's pretty interesting because you see on that left-hand side, he makes a 4-point, but in a very unusual manner. That big, heavy tine coming out kind of the middle of that beam, and then forking out there in a big fork. Now we've got another kind of a non-typical here with some extra points, and look at that eye guard on the right. That's a big feller. And then on down the line here, see if we can scoot up a little. This one again has a very large eye guard, and look at that strange point kind of coming up on the right-hand beam there. It looks like it probably got damaged at some point and kind of grew around the damage. Then there's another 3-point that the forks are on the top, and that's kind of unusual. Typically, if we got a 3-point, those forks would be off of that main beam off of the bottom. And now here's another non-typical with some strange points here and there. From this angle, it may be a little bit hard to see, but on that right-hand beam, there's a drop tine coming off of there and kind of curling around. And then just some others that we've taken over the years and put out on display here. These 3 racks are from a subspecies of mule deer known as blacktail deer. Now blacktails, they populate about 1/3 of the western part of the state, from the crest of the Cascade Mountains to the Pacific Ocean, and range down into California, Washington, up into British Columbia. Now these didn't come from the ranch because we're on the eastern side of the Cascade Mountains, but we've gotten a few of them over the year. Now the bottom 2 are ones that I got in my youth. There's about a 15-inch 3-point there, about another 15-inch 4-point, and those are pretty nice bucks for blacktail. They're just a much smaller sized animal than the muleys here. And then this one is a dandy. Now that's a 18-inch 4x4, real heavy. This was an old guy, and believe it or not, this one was killed by my late mother-in-law when she was a young woman in her hometown over on the coast, and she won a big buck contest with it. Beat her husband, my father-in-law, to win the big buck contest. So that's a really kind of a special rack to the family. Now for comparison, we can take a little closer look at my mother-in-law's big blacktail rack compared to a really nice mule deer rack. And in reality, the blacktail rack is a better trophy for that particular species than this nice muley rack. Now I have to admit to a little false advertising for the picture that we used for our thumbnail on this video. You see, this is an ancestor of the family that owns the ranch right next door to us, so this one came from very near but not quite right on our ranch. And looking at the cars in the background, I'd say this was probably from the 1940s, and just a dandy, heavy, wide muley buck. And if you look at that Winchester 94 carbine that he's holding in the antlers, I'd say it's probably at least a 36-inch outside spread. So just a dandy. And we occasionally still see some bucks in that kind of a class. But unfortunately, our season's only about a week and a half long these days. And those kind of bucks seem to know exactly when that week and a half is and manage to stay very, very well hidden. So let's take an opportunity to look at maybe some photos of some game here on the ranch from a little more recent times. Now, in addition to these antlers that we've saved for decades or even generations, we've managed to hang on to some very, very old hides that have been passed down through several generations here in the family. And if you look at the back wall, start off with a coyote back there, and that's a good-sized coyote. And then next to him, something that is no longer here, and that's the original gray wolves that populated this area. One of the things you might find interesting is there isn't a whole lot of difference in size between that coyote and that full-grown wolf, and that's an indication of the much smaller not subspecies but strain of wolves that populated this area originally. These invasive, huge Canadian gray wolves that have been planted here are not the wolf that was here originally. So this wolf reintroduction that we're dealing with is not a reintroduction at all. It's an introduction of an invasive species, and it's causing all sorts of drama and pain to our wildlife herds and our ranching community. And then we've got a bobcat here, and we've got a lot of bobcats still around. In fact, it wasn't very long ago I had one right here in the garage of the house, and another one walked out on the porch and was looking in and watching my wife wash dishes through the kitchen door out there. And another cat that we have a lot of still to this day are the cougars, and this is a pretty good example of a large mature cat. And of course they're problematic, but not nearly so much as these packs of the Canadian gray wolves that we're dealing with today. Now here's my favorite old hide. Wolverines have been extirpated or gone from this area for a century or more. But this old guy, he harkens back to a time when these fellas were plentiful here, and pound for pound, probably the most impressive of the predators. Well, thanks for joining us today. I've enjoyed kind of showing off some of the wildlife we've encountered here on the ranch over the years, and been kind of a fun trip down memory lane. So until next time, happy trails from the Cinnabar.